Erebor, the last of the great dwarf kingdoms of Middle-earth. Our home.
Long ago, in my grandfather Thror's time, our family was driven out of the far north and came back with all their wealth and their tools to this mountain on the map. They mined and they tunneled, and they made huger halls and greater workshops. And my grandfather was king under the mountain again.
The dwarves had this wonderful homeland called Erebor, which is a city inside a mountain. And all that you see is a doorway at the front of the mountain. But once you go through that doorway, you are into the most incredible world of art, riches, architecture.
And a place, you know, truly, truly beyond the imagination of anyone except dwarves with mallets and chisels and a lot of time and patience.
It started out as a mine. The dwarves entered the mountain because it was full of precious minerals and metal.
That was reason enough to start chipping their way into the mountain, and they would then carve architecture into that. So there's a heap of architecture above you and a heap of architecture below you.
Erebor is a great city. That's kind of an equivalent to Minas Tirith in its splendor and size and richness, but it's all inside a mountain.
Which to me was very exciting. It needed to feel cavernous and infinite, because when they go in there, it's not just a few tunnels that where a dragon's hiding. It's huge and vast and deep. So that was really beautiful.
We started the design process paying attention to what we'd actually designed before for Moria, and we really get the impression of these huge spaces, really huge halls.
Behold, the great realm and dwarf city of Dwaradilf.
And the key element to the dwarven architecture and dwarven aesthetic in general is the lack of curves. Curves are what defines the elven architecture.
There's a sort of whimsical side to elven architecture. Much more floral, it's much more organic.
And the dwarven architecture is the polar opposite of that. And it's solid and stocky. Everything is angles and straight lines.
We've never seen a dwarf kingdom in its heyday. You know, we've seen ruined ones before, but not one in its prime.
As part of this point of difference of Erebor from Moria, we decided to go with a palette change inside this mountain.
Moria was basically a kind of a grey stone, very kind of bleak and dark and ruinous because it had been inhabited by Balrogs and orcs.
Whereas this dwarven city was pretty much intact, you know, so there was an opportunity to show a dwarven city in the light. And while we were working out what that was, I came across some great reference of green marble flecked with gold that's mined in a mountain in China. And it was just great, hey, here's the gift, you know. The gift is the Lonely Mountain is a solid green marble mountain with veins of quartz carrying all sorts of minerals. And as they've tapped their way through this beautiful marble, they've also smoothed off the edges and made rooms and corridors and stairways. One of the big influences there was chapels in the salt mines in Russia. You know, the function of a salt mine is to gain you access to the veins of salt to get it out. But to do that, you have to leave a certain amount to hold the roof above up. And so the guys had managed to chisel out these beautiful salt chapels in the middle of a mountain. And so it's all about the mathematics of how to mine inside a mountain, how to keep the mountain standing up.
Imagine that you're in the Grand Canyon that's been turned upside down and everything is carved. Nothing has been constructed out of masonry. Everything has been carved from the rock. There's a temple in India called Kailash Nath. an extraordinary stone temple carved out of a cliff. There's a lot of that in a lot of the drawings that I did, trying to imagine what would this place be like if it had been built by dwarves and carved into a mountainside. One of the things that defined Erebor as compared to Moria is their infatuation with monumental sculpture. It's absolutely symbolic of the way they see themselves.
Although the dwarves are obviously by definition smaller than the other human inhabitants of Middle-earth, when they represent themselves in statues, we get this sense of this kind of mighty, powerful and venerable people.
And a lot of people don't know the backstory that Tolkien wrote to the dwarves, but they were the first creatures actually made. And they were made by mistake by one of the gods.
It's Aule who is particularly associated with craftsmanship. And it turns out that he has done this without the permission of Eru, the one god. Eru's plan was for the elves to be the firstborn, the first kindred, and actually Aule has created the dwarves first.
And so they are put to sleep until their time comes when the world is ready for them to come forth.
And when they awoke, they were suddenly aware of the fact that Middle-earth wasn't there for them, it was there for the elves.
The fact that the dwarves are considered a secondary race has really shaped them. Dwarves have big, proud egos. You look at Erebor and they build big. I think when you see monuments like that, you realize that dwarves believe they're going to be around for a long time. They believe they have a legacy in this world. You know, you don't build monuments like that if you don't believe that your line is going to live and live and live.
If you look at the dwarven statues, they were all big and blocky and angular. There was nothing soft, there's nothing gentle about them. It's almost like Russian brutalist architecture. A lot of that big Russian sculpture was very stylized, you know, no softness, it's about strength. They're brutal and strong.
Peter really liked something that was done by one of the Weta artists, which was of a crouching dwarf with an axe, suggesting the military power and the preciousness of what they were guarding.
It's a stronghold, and the only way into Erebor is through this enormous singular gate.
I think we started out quite modestly under the Lonely Mountain, once again thinking of Tolkien, thinking of that little door at the bottom of the mountain. And Peter simply kept coming back and saying, well, no, something bigger, something grander, something more extraordinary. We tried very hard to raise Erebor up on ramparts and stairways and to actually have the Dwarven kingdom dominating one of the grandest human cities in the East, and to be in a city like Dale, which is a prosperous, thriving metropolis, but always to have somewhere above you up against the sky and silhouette of this enormous mountain, this great Dwarven kingdom looking over you, I think would have been extraordinary. The biggest monument I've ever seen of that kind, and it's not one that's been carved, it's been constructed, is the monument of the Battle of Nations in Leipzig in former East Germany. It's absolutely extraordinary, and the figures that are there, there's a St. Michael, there's the face of Loki is on the steps leading up each side of it. There's these huge Teutonic knights which ring the structure at the very top and guard the crypt in the center. That was a great inspiration for Erebor.
The main gate of Erebor feels impenetrable, you know, massive ramparts, but it's also the scale, because like you come up to this huge gate, and obviously if that's the front door, then how big is inside this mountain?
And once you enter in through the front gate, you enter into a long kind of entrance hall, and from there you can kind of see down into various depths in various directions.
Certainly imagining some big spaces. I wouldn't be surprised if we would only end up just building a set inside K-stage for one of the main halls that's as big as the stage. Just about lining the walls, you know. I mean, almost. I mean, shoot it. You kind of want something of that scale and size, you know.
The entrance hall filled Kong stage, which was wonderful because then we had the thickness of the wall, so we could really sense something of the scale and strength of the place.
The way that it was built, everything was massive. The ramparts would go really high, or the big dwarf sculptures would be really genuinely huge. So I found that I got a really good sense of the character of the dwarves' ability to build such huge creations, and they're just such short of stature.
You feel very secure being inside the walls. It's like you're in a really fortified fortress that no one can get into, and that's exactly what it was in the movie.
So essentially what we're looking at is the usual art department materials, polystyrene and plaster and paint, but this time made to represent this deep-hued, green, highly polished and veined marble. And we're very fortunate to have Catherine Lim as the set finisher. She was a real expert on actually kind of creating those very realistic surfaces.
Yep. And just over there is concrete. So we're trying to work out what the best substrate is, what's the cheapest one.
Cool.
So I went to a school where I just learned how to paint marble for six months in Brussels, and that was quite helpful when we actually came to having to paint miles and miles of marble here. It's basically a dark green marble with a little bit of gold going through it and red veins, so it looks as if it's got some life to it, and that's a beautiful and rich marble.
It might have been built out of things that you could knock a hole in, but it certainly looked like it was green marble. It was, you know, you'd have to go up and actually make sure it wasn't green marble a lot of the time. Loved the design of it.
God, you walk onto these sets and they're just unbelievable. Like walking through the sets of Erebor after the dragon has come, and there are massive scratches through the walls.
I've got to say this is probably one of my favourites so far. It's predominantly lots of destruction and debris, as you can probably see behind me. Interior Erebor was like Dale in that you could tell it was once a grand, beautiful place, and it was completely destroyed.
And you get a sense of what it must have been like when it was in its heyday. We looked at pictures of Detroit, a city that's, you know, fallen on hard times, and so there are interiors of theatres and buildings that were once wonderful, and here they were in disrepair, and so that was the kind of feeling that we were trying to evoke with Erebor.
One of the elements in the story was that directly adjacent to the great entrance hall of Erebor was the armoury. And so we had two stages very close to each other with a sort of corridor in between. So we came up with the concept of why don't we make a corridor that goes from the grand armoury through and then into the next stage, which is then the great hall.
We had the main door open to K-stage, so you could basically walk between sound stages and never leave the set.
It was quite appropriate that the weapons area, the armory, would be kind of adjacent to the entrance hall so that people could grab their weapons and kind of run in and leap to the defences.
The Erebor armory set was a great set. We brought in all these racks of spears and weapons and dressed the hell out of it. You know, we filled that room up with all sorts of dwarven weapons and also these amazing dwarven suits of armour on stands.
In the Dwarven Armoury, we find armour that's from our forefathers.
From the very beginning of the design process, we knew that at some point we're going to have to deliver the regal dwarfs. Tolkien gave us the lead once again. He wrote such beautiful words around the shining armour and the dying light.
Hood and cloak were gone. They were in shining armour, and red light leapt from their eyes. In the gloom, the great dwarf gleamed like gold in a dying fire.
The jumping-off point of Tolkien's description in the book was great fodder for designing some cool armour, so we were able to go to town with it. My thought process with the regal armour was the idea that the lineage of kings and the history of the dwarves sort of accumulated into this one mountain of wealth, and the company would, you know, just cherry pick stuff that they saw in the Horde as being, well, I'm gonna wear that.
Nick, very early up, conceptualized some very broad archetypes, and Pete loved them.
He gravitated more towards the idea of sort of large expanses of metal, so, you know, large plate armor. A lot of Eastern European, Indian armor, which they incorporated a lot of small segments of plate interwoven with chain and all sorts of, you know, a myriad of different patterns. The samurai armor was definitely a heavy influence as well, like their little armored tanks, essentially. And I found that quite compelling, so that was something I explored a lot with the dwarves.
So when you're faced with designing 13 dwarves, Nick is having to come up with unique and original ideas. Slowly, he started to knock them off. He started to define and find these designs, and Peter loved them.
I have to say, those are some of probably the most gorgeous costumes ever created for a motion picture.
Oh, can you pan onto Zane and repeat that, Zane?
I'm just repeating what Richard said.
Oh, no, you say as your quote, then it will get on.
No, I'm not good on camera.
I mean, these are the best costume ideas that we've seen so far.
Great.
The first time I saw the regal armor, I was just gobsmacked. You know, I saw a picture of it and it looked incredible, and then we had the fittings.
Perfect, thank you.
Yes, the spleen's quite tough.
Oh, it's better, yeah, just there.
Obviously, the most special suit of Erebor regal armor is Thorin's.
He takes the cake, really, because we designed and built and painted and finished a suit of armor for him with a ram motif and a full helmet.
It was like a motorcycle helmet made of gold with the kind of crafted ram's horns that came out of the side. I'm sad that we never saw that because the design was extraordinary.
And it was spectacular and it was beautiful, but it just wasn't Thorin. And in that last few days, Nick found a gem in the mountain.
We came to the raven motif, which sort of ties to Thorin and his family and the mountain.
It always felt right because it's part of the legend of when the king comes back to the mountain, the ravens will return to Erebor.
The raven very much became a motif for the royal line of Thror, Thrain and Thorin.
So that seemed appropriate and it worked really well from an aesthetic point of view, having the inlaid black sort of obsidian pieces, which were incorporated into the crown that Paul designed and then into the armour that I designed to go with it.
You sit here in these vast halls with a crown upon your head, and yet you are lesser now than you have ever been.
I spent the day doing this area in Erebor, and Peter looked at it and said, well, I've got to say I'm underwhelmed.
Yeah. It's just a shame that with all these big, grand ideas we've had, that we've ended up with something that's just slammed against a wall.
Yes. Sometimes you can work quite hard on an idea that you think is brilliant, and Peter will look at it and, yeah, okay, you know, what else have you got? So that's quite good as well, because you don't really ever forget that it's part of a very small portion of a very big process.
So you hold one of these up.
And you look intelligent? No, we're going to do that.
No. You hold this up.
Okay.
And you're showing it to Alan.
Right.
And you're going, and Alan's just shaking his head.
Yeah.
And then, Alan, what you do... No, a little closer.
Then I throw up on it?
No, just a little closer to him. And then, so you show him this one. You shake your head like, that sucks, John. And then you pick this one up, which is one of yours.
No, this one too.
Okay, well then you pick one up, one that's yours, and then he shakes his head. Okay, here we go, ready? So we'll take it from the top, and...
What do you think? No? Oh. It's off. Who did that?
So then we kind of came up with something that involved adding a kind of a green screen shoot-off with a lot more depth.
The throne room in Erebor was literally a landing strip of green, a throne and a pillar. There was nothing else there.
And then you get shown the art, the concept art for what that throne room will actually look like in the movie. And it's incredible. This island suspended in a void, surrounded by giant dwarven statues.
So that as you walk down that central walkway, you're flanked by a kind of a standing guard, essentially, of these figures.
The way the process kicks off is we will take a sequence and identify the shots that kind of represent the definitive views of the environment, and Alan Lee and John Howe are doing concept art for those master shots. And so that becomes our reference point for kicking off the 3D build.
We've made the sense of the depth of the space around them. We've extended the throne column up.
And in that throne is set the Arkenstone, which to the dwarves is the most precious object in their world, essentially, which was uncovered during the course of their excavations deep in the heart of the mountain.
The whole thing about Erebor is it probably goes down as far as the mountain goes up. And they've worked their way right down to the very heart of the mountain. They've found the Arkenstone.
This is the lowest part of the mine shaft, which is kind of like off limits, really. The cavern as such is above, and that's where a lot of the work is going along. A lot of the machinery's up there, a lot of the treasure's up there. This is sort of the depths of the cavern, and these guys are working the lower parts. And our man down here, he suddenly comes across this most incredibly powerful, beautiful stone.
The Arkenstone, it's this mystic rock that the dwarves uncovered. It doesn't essentially have power. It's not like, you know, something that's going to be able to melt tanks and, you know, blow things up. But it's become so symbolic that it's the only thing that will unite the 7 dwarf families who are scattered around Middle-earth.
May the heart of the mountain unite all dwarves in defense of this home.
It shone like silver in the firelight, like water in the sun, like snow under the stars, like rain upon the moon.
The description that Professor Tolkien gave was of a light that was so active and so primeval that it was almost like the beginning of creation.
The way that we first conceived it was that captured within it some kind of hologram of what the universe had looked like at the moment of its creation.
Maybe it's a remnant of the Tolkienian Big Bang. There's something that sort of reflects the nature of the universe in this small rock, which is why it's so precious to the dwarves.
We would look at photographs from the Hubble Space Telescope. That would give us the kind of reference that we were using for that sense of deep space that we see where we peer into the stone.
And then Peter wanted that to sort of expand, sort of trail out into the air from the Arkenstone itself.
You know, it's like swirling constellations inside, slowly.
Yeah.
Their forces light out beyond the surface of it, and it drifts, and maybe it creates little kind of rainbow effects in the atmosphere, but then it sort of dissipates. It was as if I was holding the stone still here for a few seconds. All these light refractions would drift out of it.
Yeah.
We did have a Arkenstone prop, which is kind of like a glass rock that was sort of a creamy white colour.
We had some shapes made up, and Peter chose one of them and thought that was nice. And the same, our producer is much more kind of down to earth than most of us. Said it looks like a breast implant.
I wasn't going to mention that set us back 3 months. No.
And then after that, Peter said, well, now that you've said it, that's all we're going to see, you know?
We couldn't actually think of it in any other way from that point, you know, having put this into our mind, you know.
Thanks very much.
Anyway, we came up with the shape that kind of looked right and felt right.
The thing with Erebor was it is this, you know, it's this vast kind of infinite place, but the Deep Tombs is a point where it's no longer vast and infinite. You know, we know from the book that it's the bottom of Erebor. So you've reached an end point, you know, in Erebor, and it had to kind of feel like that.
Yeah. Would there be lake men here? And
let me get my pictures. Hang on, stay right where you are.
Yeah, I'll just hand these around. So the idea, the rough idea, is that this thing is on a shield held by statues, and you guys are the only ones on the shield. You and Gandalf and Bayon and Radagast are here. But there's going to be, I mean, this doesn't really show it. There's going to be like hundreds of Danes, dwarves, all around. You can hand it around, but we just rest it against the corpse.
We came up with this idea that this sort of a stone plinth is held by two figures on the edge of this bottomless chasm of some kind.
You know, it's a conscious decision on behalf of the architects and the people that were making this space, and I'm talking the dwarves, to stop there and to not carry on around it and leave it as a pinnacle. You know, it literally was, you know, an end point for them.
Tolkien was very influenced by the ideas of Norse mythology, that after death there will be a period of waiting, in some cases waiting for return. And actually Thorin says much the same thing when he's mortally wounded.
I go now to the halls of waiting to sit beside my fathers until the world is renewed.
There is a short piece Tolkien wrote which predicts how Middle-earth will end and how after that the world will be remade, the world will be renewed.
As for the fate of the dwarves, some of them then return to Middle-earth. And because of their skill and their reputation as craftsmen, they will be a critical factor in the rebuilding of a new world, in the recreation of a new and we hope a better Middle-earth.
I have a very soft spot for dwarves and dwarven design within this world. You know, at the heart of the dwarves, they make things. And I relate that with our own workforce, our own team, that love of making things with your hands and creating something special.
For us on Hobbit, we were able to build 107 sets, 107 different environments. There is a vast scale that's so beyond everyday imagination. But also there's a real intimacy when you're able to build a set and go there and say, wow, I would love to live here.
The sheer scope of what's on the screen in the Hobbit trilogy is so vast that it sent us off looking for reference and inspiration in practically every corner of the world and through a few thousand years of history. I can't imagine any other job that lets you do that.
10 years worth of work's gone into producing these 6 films and finding a visual narrative for all of those worlds in Middle-earth. I don't think anyone will ever have the opportunity to really analyse a world as much as we have with Middle-earth.
The responsibility that all the visual artists involved with the films is of creating something that is going to last for a very long time, which is actually going to affect the way that people read the books, whether we like it or not. We've created this version of Middle-earth, which is Middle-earth for a huge number of people.
I've begun to reflect on the fact that never before in our own country's history has there been the coming together of such a significant group of craftspeople and artisans to create a singular art movement of this scale.
I do have so much respect for the work that these guys, the stuff that they make, that I can't bear to throw any of it away. The wonderful costumes and the sets and the props and the weapons that get built. It's on film now. The film will survive way beyond us, but these objects, they are special.
Still sharp.
So I have warehouses full of them.
I was just walking through there the other day, actually. It's very much like walking through the warehouse of Raiders of the Lost Ark. I think Peter ultimately would like to showcase a lot of these things and possibly why he's kept them.
That would be a hope for the future. I mean, there's no plans at the moment, but certainly, you know, it's be nice to give people a chance to have a look at it one day.
It's one of the great joys of these films is that imagining and building of this varied and unique architecture of Middle-earth. All these props and the scenery and the sets are so meticulously, believably real that you forget you're in the studios in Wellington. Middle-earth was there. It existed.
Usually they've flown off by now.
What the hell is going on?
Look at that, look at the drink. Can you see it drinking? Now, what you've got to be careful of is, of course, not to drown the bee with honey. Don't kill it with kindness, literally. Put a bit of honey next to a bee that's nearly dying and its proboscis comes out. And I think people thought I was, I wouldn't say Jesus, but certainly a more impressive figure than I am, that I knew that you could actually resuscitate an almost dead bee with honey. Ben, you'd be good to him for me, all right?
You can trust me, Matt.
Okay. So I saved it. That was my good deed for that day. It's all in a day's work. Bilbo Baggins, MD. Thank you very much. Thank you. When Bilbo comes back, you know the tone and you know the mood. The scene was very calm, actually. The set was very calm. After all he's been through, and after all, you know, we've been through as the audience, yeah, there is a sense of completion to it, and it's in a sense of full circle.
I was thinking of a poignant moment. There's a sense of the journey you've just been under. The plonky kind of way to do it is that you stand there and we hear Gandalf's voice saying, you know, if you do come back, you'll be changed and all that. But it'd be nice to do the essence of that without actually having to have the voice. Maybe there's some clothing scattered on the floor and there's a handkerchief in there, the handkerchief that you never got. You know when you say,
I've forgotten my handkerchiefs.
Here,
use this. You kind of think, oh yeah, this is just Bilbo and it's Bilbo and it's Bilbo. And then you think, God, no, he's not the same person that he was 2 films ago. So it's his way of getting back to, well, this is the life I had before, but like anyone returning from war, it will never be exactly like it was before. Before you've done the things you've done and seen the things you've seen and met the people you've met. Because it's the end of this journey for Bilbo and for all of us.
Until the next movie.
When everyone said goodbye at the end of the 2013 pickups, everyone, their final farewell to each other was, I'll see you next year. Because we just presumed, of course, we're going to do more pickups.
You know, when we thought about doing stuff in 2014, we were 100% certain that it was going to happen.
Oh, the rumour mill didn't stop.
I'm sure I was winding Adam up by telling him that there was more to do.
There were, you know, phone calls and emails that spun around at some point in 2014 of people sort of rumbling and saying, oh, I think it's coming and we're going to come back. We never did.
The dragon is dead. Why look to our defences? We've nothing to fear.
This mountain was hard won. I will not see it taken again.
ADR, which is the additional dialogue recording, we would normally have started that in like July because we would have been spending May and June shooting pickups. We didn't have those on this film.
One more.
And what was weird about that was none of the actors believed this was it. And I didn't believe it was it.
You never say, that's the end. I used to think, well, that's that done with.
Then even now, I still feel like there's going to be a phone call that says, we just need you to get into costume one more time. We just need this extra shot. But Pete, the movie's finished, you know, it's been and gone. Yeah, but we just need an extra shot for the director's cut. So, never say never.
Take 4.
Onwards! We take the cliffs!
Perfect. Thank you. That's it. I now realise Richard Armitage stepped away from the microphone. It was the last time he ever played Thorin Oakenshield. All right, guys. Hey, nice work. Thank you so much. You know, it's not that it didn't go unnoticed. It just was one of those things where you can't quite believe it, so you always think it's going to be a bit more. But, you know, after over 17 years, 18 years of making these movies, all stories come to an end.
On Lord of the Rings, we didn't know how much we didn't know. We just thought we were making a little bit of a big film.
I'm the production manager, so I have to sit here and wait for things to go wrong, basically.
Overnight, Lake Wakatipu reached its highest level in 120 years.
I love coming to Te Ana because we get to film on indoor sporting areas.
Very small set, very low roof, but it'll all be fine in the end. We'll get there.
The average age on set when we made Lord of the Rings was 25. Everyone was really young.
But that was kind of part of the charm, you know. We're all learning, and we all learned so much.
We have done some triage on the script.
Just a minute, Peter, I need to get in here.
I remember when I first heard that Fran and Pete were going to try to tell these stories, I thought they were off their rocker. I thought they were unfilmable. There's no way you can do it.
And action.
Oh, hello.
You're rolling.
There were plenty of times in Lord of the Rings when I thought, this ain't going to work. This is too ambitious. These Kiwis are out at their depth. And I was absolutely wrong.
Welcome to an adventure into exotic and far-off lands.
The magic that I think that happened on Rings was a very naive form of magic, in that no one quite knew how extravagant and extraordinary the trilogy would become.
Of course, coming into The Hobbit, there were huge expectations on Peter and on us, and we were no longer flying under the radar.
Going back for The Hobbit, you could really feel that a film industry and a talent pool was really firmly cemented in that part of the world.
We're very professional here in New Zealand.
There's a bit of the Kiwi spirit of these movies, too, that should never be denied. It's an extremely important part of the fabric of these films.
Those are some amazing shorts.
Where else could we be but in New Zealand? The big green stone on the end of a wire.
If they were made anywhere else, it wouldn't have that same feeling.
We start the day with a dance. That's the first thing we do. What it's given me as a sound designer is an experience that I would not have had if Peter hadn't kept these films in New Zealand. Moving your feet, just moving around. And I'm sure that's the same with a lot of New Zealanders. You know, that was a gift from Peter.
I think there is an understanding amongst most New Zealanders that these films are great for the country. A lot of those people probably had parts on Lord of the Rings. Pretty much all of New Zealand was on Lord of the Rings.
It's hard to find somebody here who's not related to somebody who hasn't worked on a film.
We're cousins.
He's marrying my sister.
Coming back and meeting people throughout the crew and cast who are still the same people.
You might remember me from such movies as The Lord of the Rings. I was in the Council Chamber scene.
Oh, I do.
Major motion picture trilogy.
We've been really lucky, you know, this journey that we've been on, by and large, with a lot of the same core crew and the same filmmaking team.
Can make sure I'm in focus, please.
Awesome, thank you, all done.
I don't know if one team has ever worked on all 6 films in a series to the extent that this has all been handcrafted by one sort of central team of people.
The same heads of department, the same creative talent. And we're talking, you know, 20 or 30 of the most senior people in The Hobbit were Lord of the Rings veterans. We have deliberately tried to pull the same people back again because they are the sort of the beating heart, they're the spirit of the film.
The crew on this are people that I've worked with for the last 20 years, and it feels like I'm working with the same family again.
You want to see a doctor about that, Jet?
I'm going to.
It's brought a lot of people to New Zealand. I've met a huge amount of people from all over the world who have come here to work on these projects. And it's actually been a very unifying thing.
You know, they were craftspeople, painters, sculptors, and all kind of united by this love of the project.
To have my name associated with a project that I am so proud of means a huge amount to me. I loved Middle-earth before I worked on these films, but I love now being part of Middle-earth.
Ready to give it one more go?
Exactly.
Let's see if I can get in front of camera this time.
It becomes an end of a whole part of your life
and a very enjoyable part of your life. So you look back with great fondness.
There we are. Fantastic.
And sort of maybe quite glad I don't have to do any more dwarfs at the moment. But it was great fun. I loved it.
Yeah, that's perfect. That was intentional. Working with Peter has definitely sort of moulded me into the art director that I am now.
Tell me how a petrified body gets in that position.
Well, I kind of thought he was fried against the pillar.
I don't think so. Just lie him on the ground. He'll look perfectly fine lying on his side.
Right. You know, he's trained me well. Peter's trained me well.
Going from being a fan to being a crew member, so many moments, daily moments, where I've just thought, wow.
Reset.
It's rousing first thing in the morning.
It's the furthest away from my home I could be. Literally, any further, I would have to leave the earth to be further away. And I couldn't have felt closer to home.
In a really corny way, I felt like I grew up doing The Hobbit. I stepped away from everything that I was comfortable with in the UK and came out here. And I wasn't comfortable. Working on a film set wasn't the norm for me.
Cutting there, thank you.
And now it is, and now I love it.
I'm not afraid. I'm up for it. I'll give him a taste of the dwarfish iron right up his jacksie.
Yeah, 100% it changed me. 100%, yeah.
I think it'd be interesting looking back through the footage that you have. I imagine it would be quite hard to find me in any of that behind-the-scenes footage, because I certainly actively avoided those cameras. Even in the very first photograph of the dwarves, for some reason I'm hiding at the back behind someone's shoulder because I just didn't know whether I could do this. I really didn't know whether I could fill these boots. I thought I might be on my way home, so I just didn't want to put myself forward until I'd understood what that character was. Amazing, right? Amazing. I love this book. I read it when I was 7 years old, so I felt the weight of kingship and of responsibility, which was both mine and Thorin's.
You start that job and the job becomes your life. There's nothing as surer than that. You are partly those films.
It is a truly life-changing experience. I live here now, for a start. I count my lucky stars every day. You know, when I wished on that star with my daughter to get the job, I still think about that every time I look out the window, look up, and I think, yeah, thank you for that.
I met my wife, Liz Mullane, was on Lord of the Rings. We fell in love, and then we ended up getting married, and then we've got a little 8-year-old daughter now, Ruby. So it's great to be able to share the experience with her.
Forget anything else that I've done on theatre or film. My children, this is for them the only thing that I've done.
Until you have a child, you don't realise how cool it is to have got to play Legolas in either The Hobbit or The Lord of the Rings.
My son wasn't born at the start of this project, and, you know, he's at school now. It's been a long road, but, you know, it's been a great one. It's been a fantastic project to be involved with.
This is the same scene still, but we're cutting to, another 20 minutes has gone by.
It was in '97. I was storyboarding with Peter, and I was the first person to actually start doing any drawing for the Lord of the Rings trilogy. So you'll just have to make me the last interview that you do for the extended edition.
And cut! Great. Well, let's show that one to Pete.
I look at the fork in the road, and it's just such a huge, huge turning, and could easily have not happened. I mean, I remember when I first got the call from my agent saying there's 3 weeks' work down in New Zealand to do the voice for an animated character. And I said, well, I'm not that interested in doing that. I'd rather play a proper role. There must be something decent in it. There's lots of good characters in Lord of the Rings.
You're a liar and a thief.
Teeth? And I just think how close one sails to the wind in life, where you make one decision and it takes you, the trajectory that it sent me off on, inspired by Peter.
The Lord of the Rings was certainly going to change my life in one way or the other. I mean, it was either going to be a disaster in which case I'd be a ridiculed New Zealand filmmaker who tried to make this unfilmable book and failed completely. It was going to change my life in that way, or it was going to change my life in the opposite way, and it was going to be successful filming the unfilmable book. And action. The Hobbit was not potentially going to change my life in quite that same way, but to me it was a little bit tricky because I hadn't really gone into it with as much preparation as I would have liked. And so what I kind of ended up doing on The Hobbit is I went into it and actually decided to use it as an experience to grow as a filmmaker. The Hobbit really was ultimately, in a way, my second act film school, if you like. And so I actually had a hell of a great time on The Hobbit because I was there every day wanting to challenge myself to become a better filmmaker.
Okay, cut. That's good. When you start off with a group of people and you put them under pressure, they come together as a group. And it's meant that we've formed very strong bonds.
Everybody went through some crazy physical and emotional ride. I call it a human experiment for everybody involved. It's everybody giving everything they could.
That's a hard work. Fun, though.
What we had been through as a group mirrored so much the fictional journey that they sort of interwove through those years.
There was a case slightly of art mirroring life in that way.
And we talked about this then, and it's the same now. The binding force of the fellowship, it transcends friendship and working relationships.
So there's Elijah guy. I was speaking to him today, and he's just been a real idiot. He's up for it. Hey! Hey! Sit down, man.
How are you? You spend that much time with people that you genuinely care about. Years can pass and you see them and it's as if no time has passed.
It sort of feels like stepping back in time.
When you're in the middle of something, you can't always assess it. It's only when I actually meet somebody who says these films, they've changed their lives, or they've watched them dozens and dozens of times, that you begin to think, good gracious me, and I was all a part of that, and I've become a part of people's lives as a result.
The millions of people that now carry that work in their own imagination are what gets you up in the morning, gets you to keep doing the best you possibly can.
It's really easy to get lost, you know, when you're sitting at your desk trying to come up with something, but when you go to those conventions and see the impact that it has on people, it's quite a special thing.
I'm not generally too sentimental about ending a job, because it's supposed to end and then you're supposed to give it to other people. The last part of the jigsaw puzzle is how it's received by fans who are going to see it.
I have a huge amount of respect for fans because, you know, basically I am one of those people. I mean, I'm just a lucky fan that gets to make the movies, but I am essentially, I mean, always have been since I was, 8 or 9 years old, a fan of fantastical cinema.
It's interesting, this tipping point where something is the creation of a team, and then it belongs to popular culture. It becomes something that belongs to everybody.
One of the joys of this experience is that it does never end. Those experiences continue, and this is part of that continuing experience, just talking about it with you, talking about it. I'm sure I'll be talking about it for the rest of my career.
This is what we'll be doing for the rest of our lives.
We're never going to get to work on something that means this much, not just to fans, but to us as the cast as well. Kate was going around with a script, knocking on doors and getting us all to sign her script. And I hadn't really thought of doing that. And I said, oh, I'm surprised that you want my autograph. And she said, no, but we're never going to get to do this ever again. We won't ever get to work on a movie like this. This is special.
To being part of The Hobbit in any way that I could, I would have served drinks in the background. I would have done anything to be able to be there.
For her to be that passionate about the fact that she needed to record this for all time made me realise she was quite right. People who don't know what it was like can pay lip service to it, but for those of us that got the experience and the privilege, that changed us. It really did.
I felt like it was a real gift to be able to be there, and, I think that these films will be a memorable time capsule of the time in which they were made.
So Andrew, you're going to make it look fantastic.
Hey, we are making it look fantastic. She already looks fantastic. Those sort of stories become timeless because it doesn't matter what generation and what age is viewing or reading them. it will always have something relevant to say to that audience. I feel that if I succeed in working on some projects that will live forever, I've accomplished what I want in filmmaking.
You know, as they say in the book, the road goes ever on. I mean, it's there as a movie or a collection of movies for as long as people look at movies. And now I and the others who were part of telling this movie story for Peter Jackson are part of that tradition. So for me, it doesn't end. It keeps going.
There's something vaguely familiar about this situation. As an actor playing a part on the screen, it will mean more than anything I've ever done. And I've done quite a bit.
It's going to be Christopher's last shot.
It's going to be Christopher's.
In Lord of the Rings, you said, you know, this is my last film. I should have put money on it.
Are you in need of assistance, my lady? And don't forget now, I am a good man in this film.
Yes. Absolutely. I love both.
Very decent, honourable, upright, noble.
It's like a mug shot with your name on it.
Yeah.
I can't imagine my life for the last few years if that hadn't been a part of it. It's a huge part of my life. It's a hell of an experience. I mean, it was something that you shouldn't get used to because it won't happen again, you know.
Sitting here today, having just finished the second Tolkien trilogy, I actually couldn't imagine a scenario of how I would have preferred to spend the last 16, 17 years of my life in any other way. I mean, I'm very content, very happy to have done that. I mean, it's exactly what I dreamt of doing when I was a kid. Very lucky.
It's very difficult to kind of sum up what I feel about the whole experience. My nightmare was that I would get on a plane and, you know, I kind of lose my memory of it and it would just become almost like a Rip Van Winkle experience. But then we've got the evidence. You know, the whole thing has just been documented so well.
It's good that things have a beginning and an end, you know, a there and a back again, because you don't want to get stuck in Middle-earth. You want to have a good trip around and then head back home again and pick up where you left off before that phone rang 17 years ago. So it's been it's been quite a trip, but I think it's time to head back home.
We do reflect on this moment, what it actually means to get to the end, to have been there, travelled the road, and got back home again. And that's a very, very special feeling.
You just realise how incredibly lucky you were. We were blessed, you know, we were privileged. We got to make these films with some really cool people. And, you know, we were the people who were lucky enough every day to go and walk in the world of Professor Tolkien's imagination. That's who we were.
It's been a great journey, and it'll be sad to leave it behind. Middle-earth's been good to us, and let's hope that we've been good for Middle-earth.
We came from under the hill, and under hills and over the hills, our paths led. And through the air.
Through the air.
A lot easier for dwarfs to travel via helicopter.
We are they that walked unseen.
It's not the most sexy of costumes.
We were the clue finders.
We were the clue finders. The web cutters.
There we go. That's really uncomfortable.
The stinging flies.
Sting. It's a good name.
We were chosen for the lucky number.
The lucky number.
And fish!
We were they that buried their friends alive.
Invigorating.
And drowned them.
And drew them alive again from the water.
Come on!
We came from the end of a bag.
But no bag went over us.
This is what happens when you misbehave.
We were the friends of
bears and the guests of
eagles. We were ring winners. And luck wearers. And we were barrel riders.
And we were barrel riders.
That's good fun.
I'm not going to tickle you.
My feet have gotten bigger.
Right, that does it.
Stop. Don't ever let it be said that I don't look after my stunt double.
Thanks, man.
Just a better.
You'll have a tale or two to tell when you come back.
Can you promise that I will come back?
No. And if you do, you will not be the same.
One day I'll remember. Remember everything that happened, the good, the bad. And how lucky I am that I made it home.